Hi, everyone. We are here doing the webinar 4 on Digestion 102. I'm talking all about the microbiome and pro tips for the most common digestive complaints that I see in the office. I'm super stoked to tell you all about this. And I'm Dr. Olson, and let's get started. So first, Digestion 102, which is a continuation of last week's series on Digestion 101, where I really outlaid all of the basics, and we're just going to continue to build on those foundations. So next, here's the microbiome. So I really enjoyed this photo that I found on the wonderful internet, illustration by Susie Parker, how we are so much of our microbiome. So the term microbiome actually encompasses all of the genetic material that is all the microbes. So that's bacteria, fungi, protozoa, if you have them, and viruses that all live on and inside the human body. Fun fact, if you go cell by cell, we are 50% human cells and 50% actual microbiome. So the bacteria, the fungi, etc., and the viruses. If you go by genetic material, so if you take all the DNA that is within the bacteria, the fungi, the viruses that are on your body, and your own DNA, you are actually 99% critters. So there's only 1% of your DNA when you're looking at that, which is crazy. So of course it makes sense that those critters are going to significantly change your health. And so the number of genes in all the microbes in one person's microbiome is 200 times the number of genes in the human genome. So again, that's 99% critters. And the microbiome can actually weigh as much as 5 pounds when you remove that. And there's significant diversity actually between people, actually even with those that you're living with. The interesting thing though is that if you have animals like dogs and cats, you'll actually have a more similar microbiome to those living with you compared to if you don't. So it's kind of interesting because the animals, our pets, they serve as a middleman to help our microflora as well. Okay, the other thing, so we have large concentrations of microbiomes in several different places in our body. So the largest, the major places are the gut, of course, the skin, and then the oral cavity, which I also kind of include within the it's within the digestive tract, but it's not the actual gut, right? The small intestine, the large intestine, where most of our bacteria is housed. Okay. And so what do these critters do? They digest our food. They're actually part of what causes gas and bloating. They off-gas themselves. There are many different critters. There are some that do, they produce hydrogen, or they produce methane, or something other along those lines, but they help to break down our food. And then particularly fiber, which we talked about a couple weeks ago now, all about how fiber, or soluble fiber in particular, helps with our gut bacteria. And we'll talk more about that today too. They regulate our immune system. So there's different thoughts on that. So one is that they help to protect us from harmful bacteria because of simply crowding out. If there's no real estate available, then bad bacteria, even if they come in through our system, are not actually able to they're not able to find a home, right? So then they just get excreted out. They're not able to proliferate because we have all the good bacteria there. The other thing is that 90% of our immune system actually happens within the gut. And so the microbiome, or the bacteria and the viruses and the fungi that are all living within your intestines, also help with your immune system with that regulation. There's actually more and more research showing how our childhood and throughout our lives really does affect our long-term immune system, particularly, this is actually the clean theory or germ theory, where when we're in more sterile environments, our immune system isn't inundated with all of that bacteria, which then predisposes us to more autoimmunity later on in life. So our bacteria serves, our microbiome serves such a important role in our health. They also produce vitamins, so particularly the B vitamins and vitamin K. They also activate vitamin D, which I've been talking about, or you've also been hearing about how vitamin D is so important right now during these viral times. And we have access because it's sunshine, at least here in the Pacific Northwest right now. There's also partly that it's responsible for our circadian rhythm, so actually our sleep and wake cycle. They're affected by melatonin, and it's actually like this pulsing that they'll do, so it changes daily. So our microbiome changes daily, but relatively speaking, they're pretty stable. So for the most part, it doesn't change very much, but we can definitely affect it. And it's more so with those repeated exposures rather than that one-off. So that like one-off time that say you have a poor diet, it's not going to significantly affect your microbiome to the point where it's irreversible or that you can't come back from it, which I think is really great news. So what I want to talk about in particular is dysbiosis. So I mentioned that a little bit last week, that dysbiosis is essentially the imbalance in the microbiome. That could be genetically speaking, or that could be just an actual imbalance within the flora. So we have several different families. We have, I think the biggest ones like the Bacteroides and the Firmicutes, and those two different classes of bacteria. The Firmicutes are higher in the young population, so when it changes with age as well. So when you're younger, you tend to have more of the Firmicutes. If you have a plant-based diet, meaning you're vegetarian or vegan, you're going to have more of these Firmicutes. And then if you say you're older, and or you have a more plant-based, an animal-based diet, then you're going to have more of the Bacteroides. And so we can change. So because of that, we know that changes in diet significantly affect our microbiome, because we can see that within just folks who are vegetarian, vegan versus those who are like on a paleo diet. It completely switches. And then we can also change it. We can see the markers of that if we're doing cultures. And I'll talk a little bit more about that moving forward. But first I want to talk about like dysbiosis associated with so many different things, because what happens is that our gut bacteria, they serve as a barrier with our gut lining. But what happens, right, if for some reason that barrier gets broken down, meaning our flora, our microbiome are imbalanced, then it's going to skew the protective benefits of the bacteria, which then means you can get allergies, you can get all the diabetes, obesity, all these other things, because our gut is a little bit more leaky and we've evolved so much with them. So I wanted to mention with obesity in particular, there are certain strains of bacteria that have been shown to change obesity, meaning like if you have more of a particular strain, Akkermansia, it is what it does, it helps to break down mucus, and the mucus is important for the GI lining, but it also can negatively affect having higher Akkermansia strains can help to promote weight loss, because it's helping also secrete other particular chemicals that are helpful in bringing about satiety. So it's making you fuller longer, and that's also breaking down any extra mucus, which then can help with your digestion overall and help to actually assimilate all the stuff and help with obesity. And then also arthritis, because if we think about the leaky gut, so just as a review, when we're talking about the leaky gut in particular, what I mean is that our GI lining should have really good integrity. So it should look like this, where nothing's getting through unless it's actively being transported. But what happens for one reason or another is that the particular thing that I'm looking at is tight junctions, which is just how the cells connect and talk to each other. So what happens is those tight junctions get more leaky. So instead it's more like this. And now you don't have a tight junction, right? It's loose. So then then what happens is now things can get through without having to be actively transported. And so that's going to cause then some health issues, because things aren't supposed to, some toxins that aren't supposed to be getting through are now getting through, causing your allergies, causing inflammatory bowel disease, arthritis, mood disorders, all those other things. And then because if you have increased gut permeability, then we also know you're going to get leaky brain, which then going to cause more mood disorders moving forward. Though we can also correct mood disorders with just treating with probiotics, but I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm so excited. So let's go to the next one. So dietary changes can detectably influence host environment in as little as 24 hours. So we can affect our microbiome within 24 hours. Whether or not that stays, that holds is a different story. So I know that we can change it, right, really quickly, but our microbiome is rather stable because we've been building it throughout our entire life, right? And all of our past decisions, dietarily wise, and stress and all those things have led up to your current microbiome, which is why there's so much diversity within the human population, even within households, because we all experience things a little bit differently, our diet's a little bit different, things like that. And then also how it affects our body is different. And so with that, I want to mention that we can, right, change it, and it takes about 30 days to significantly alter your microbiome with diet, which is why, like when I talked about doing like an elimination diet, it's 30 days because you're changing over time slowly that microbiome. And then though, with that slow change, you're getting all those extra health benefits. And then those strains are also getting more and more solidified, or they're getting a stronger and stronger home, right? And so as you start opening up your diet again, you can start changing it, but it's got a little bit better of a foundation, and so it's not going to completely revert it back, though that is possible if you go completely back to original diet. And so there, I want to give just a little anecdote. There was a gentleman who was doing part of a study, and he took a stool sample before he left to go stay with a tribe in Africa. And so by staying in a tribe in Africa, as you can imagine, his diet is going to be significantly changed compared to what he's eating in America. And so within the study, what he did was he sent stool samples like every 2 or 3 days, and they were actually culturing and seeing how his microbiome changed. And after the 30 days, his gut bacteria were completely different, where it was very much almost identical to those other folks within that indigenous community. Then he goes back to the States, and reverts back to his standard American diet. And within 2 weeks, his microbiome is exactly the same as what it was originally. So this is what I mean, how it is very resilient and stable, right? If we go back to our original dietary habits, but if we maintain those diet changes, then it's going to be a persistent change within that microbiome. So talking about other ways to change the microbiome is with supplements and diet as well. And in particular, we got prebiotics and probiotics. So they're very different things. So prebiotic is what feeds the critter. So essentially it's like fertilizer. And then probiotics is the actual seed. So it's like you're planting a garden. So if you think about your gut, as a garden, the probiotics is actually the seeds that you're trying to, or the plant that you're trying to grow. And each of them are a different variety, right? Different kinds of flowers. And the prebiotics is all the different fertilizer that would then feed those plants. And just like plants have certain different nutrient needs, same within the flora. And so we can actually change our microbiome depending on what we're choosing to feed it. So if we give more fertilizer, like more fiber and different kinds of fiber, we can actually change the microbiome because we're feeding a particular strain that, say, does a better job of producing neurotransmitters. So that would be one route to then affect a mood disorder, right? So if folks have more depression, I can give them a particular thing that, food-wise, or even within a supplement, that then directly benefits that microbiome that critter that I'm trying to affect. And so it can get really complicated. And then the great thing is that over the last couple of years, we've learned so much, which gives us just so much more opportunity to create, to figure out other treatment options. And then we have probiotics. And so probiotics are the actual critters. And there's a couple different ways that you can get probiotics in. And they're all very different. So when we're talking about a probiotic, the actual capsules, the supplement, I'm looking for a few different things. One is when it comes to probiotics, I care mainly about two different things. One is the amount of the pure number of critters. And so that's going to be based off the CFU on a probiotic if you're looking at the label. And I want about like 5 billion. That's a good starting place. And of course, for certain conditions, I will do significantly more than that. And for others, I'll do less. It's it's variable. The other thing is that within a probiotic, I care about diversity. So how many different strains of flora are there? Because what we know is that with the microbiome, there's so many different critters. And the diversity is really what's key. So if we have few strains, it can actually cause pathogen because there's more of them. But if we have more of a particular kind, right? But if we have a little bit of a bunch of different variety of flora, then we get the health benefits of all of them, which is where what I care about. And so we can get that through fermented foods. So like kimchi, kombucha, sauerkraut, they're all fantastic because they give you a little bit more of that diversity. If you make it at home, it's even better because you're getting some of the flora that's actually within your home, which then can help with like allergies and things like that. So again, the two biggest things when I think about when I give someone a probiotic is how much of the actual bacteria is in there, and then how much diversity is in that. And so with the diversity, so I want about at least 7 different strains. And strains means that it has, when you look at the back of a probiotic, it has a first name and a last name. So like lactobacillus is the most common strain that you find in a probiotic, but there's also like bifidobacterium or the Akkermansia that I was talking about earlier. And so those are all different kinds. And then that last name, that last bit, unlike the Akkermansia mucinide, that is a particular strain of the Akkermansia family. So it gets really complicated. But the biggest thing is that you just want a bunch of different ones. And again, I use probiotics differently. So not everyone needs one. And honestly, if you like fermented foods, you're getting a good diversity through there. One of my favorite fermented foods is 24-hour yogurt. So you make it at home in an Instant Pot, super, super easy. And what I love about it is that you get a huge amount of diversity and a pure number. So you actually get 700 billion critters per cup of a 24-hour yogurt compared to, like a lot of the probiotics are like maybe 5-10 billion. So you're getting so much more within the 24-hour yogurt. Plus the yogurt's absolutely delicious if you've, I don't know if any of you have tried it. Okay. So with that, that's kind of my little spiel on probiotics and the microbiome. And we can do so much with that. And we're going to talk a little bit more throughout the pro tips because it is about changing the microbiome a little bit. And so let's get right into it. Nausea is so common. I find a lot of folks will experience that at one point or another, right? It's that queasiness feeling in the stomach. Sometimes it can be from anxiety, just from feeling a little anxious, right? Like it's that uneasiness in the stomach. But other times it's GI related, right? And so what it actually is retrograde activity. What that means is when you eat, food is supposed to go down, but for some reason it's trying to go up, right? And so sometimes that's actually incredibly beneficial. Like if you had food poisoning, your body's like, crap, we got to get this out. We got to get this critter out. I can sense that it's bad. And so it tries to vomit, right? So that's nausea and then vomiting. In Chinese medicine, what we call that retrograde activity is stomach qi counterflow, which again can be caused for the same reason where it's really beneficial and other times not so much helpful. And essentially what the stomach chi counterflow means is just that the energy flow within our system, within our body, is going backwards, right? So we're losing that momentum, that downward momentum, and instead it's going upwards. So how are we going to help fix the nausea? Well, if you're fixing it, the first thing is, especially if you're waking up with the nausea, I don't know if any of you have done that, or you wait so long, you wake up and then you don't eat breakfast. Some folks can get the nausea, and that can often be because of low blood sugar. I often will get that. It's just because I didn't eat for one reason or another, start feeling a little bit queasy, and it's really backwards, because if you just eat, the nausea will go away. But it's ironic, right? Because you're nauseous, so you don't feel like eating. And so you just kind of have a little bit of protein and fat, particularly like nuts is a great source. You get the protein and the fat. And another thing that you can do is like, so if that's throughout the day, in the morning, just have a handful of nuts. If you end up waking first thing with it, you can try eating some protein nuts right at bedtime. And that can actually help to prevent your blood sugar from crashing to one, keep you asleep, but also help to maintain your blood sugar so it's not dipping when you wake up, causing, again, the nausea. In terms of herbs, ginger is one of my favorites for nausea. So ginger tea is fantastic. You can get straight up ginger, slice it, straight up ginger and slice it up, and then put that in some hot water. It's even better actually if you boil it for a little bit, because it's starchy, so you'll actually get more of it out if you boil it compared to just steeping it. But either way, you're going to get some. If you get it dried, then you can just do the hot water, the decoction, the infusion, which is just, hot water like you normally make tea. And that can be really beneficial, because what ginger helps to promote is it's soothing for the GI lining, but it also helps with the nausea. It kind of helps to, in Chinese medicine, it helps to promote the actual stomach flow. So it helps to counter the counterflow. That's funny. The other thing is acupressure. So with acupressure just means that you're using an acupuncture point and you're applying pressure. So two great ones for nausea. The first one is pericardium 6. That is right here on the center of your wrist. So it's actually, if you get 4 fingers and you put that at your wrist crease, that acupuncture point is going to be right at the base of that, so at the end of your 4 fingers, and it's midline, meaning right down in the center. Similarly, that point is really, really beneficial for nausea. It's actually, if you've seen those chemotherapy, like magnetic, like rings, bracelets, those are actually stimulating pericardium 6, because it's just that powerful. And so for folks who have nausea, I'll just simulate that point, whether it's with a needle or with just pressure, and it can usually make a significant difference. So that's one to keep in your back pocket for any time you feel a little nauseous, or someone else feels nauseous. You can bust that out and be like, hey, look, I can fix your nausea. And they'll love you and think you're like a magician. The next one is CV12. So CV is conception vessel. All that means is that it's midline. It's right down the center of us. And this particular point has to do with the stomach energy. So it's a way that we can directly affect that stomach chi counterflow to promote the flow downward. So it helps, instead of feeling like that upwardness, it kind of helps to bring it back down. And so where that point is if you have, so I'm going to show you on me. And of course, the internet is fantastic, and I'll show you where these points are. But here is the bottom, like where my sternum is, so where my rib cage kind of meets right here. My belly button is right here. So that point happens to be right in the center. And so honestly, you can go along anytime you're feeling nauseous and go just along here throughout your, between that section of your chest and your belly button. And whichever one is tender is likely what you need to massage, because all of them will kind of promote that descending feeling. So those are some great tips that you can just use anytime you're feeling nauseous. If you're, again, feeling like you wake up with it, or you realize that you haven't eaten a little bit, try eating just a little bit. I promise it'll make it feel better if it's actually because of low blood sugar. Ginger tea or those ginger chews I think they're delicious. Some folks don't like the taste of them, a little spicy, but they do help to, again, give you the ginger components that help with the nausea. And then those acupuncture points are really powerful points. And let's go on to the next. So heartburn is also a stomach Qi counterflow, right? It's instead of it being food that wants to come up, it's like the stomach acid that's bubbling up. So I put the anatomy on here because it's very important. It's actually that lower esophageal sphincter that has a little bit more laxity. What that just means is it's loosey-goosey. So the lower esophageal sphincter, when we're not eating, should be closed. And the reason it gets closed physiologically is actually because there's stomach acid that's hitting that sphincter, which then tells it like, oh crap, there's no food in here. The stomach acid is really high, which then means I don't want that into my esophagus, which is very sensitive. So then it closes. But what can happen for one reason or another is that, right, it gets a little bit more lax because of some sort of pathology, or it can actually be because you have too low stomach acid, right? So if there's lower stomach acid, the body thinks that it's because you just ate food, right? Which is essentially diluting the stomach acid, right? Your body thinks, stuff is coming in. I want to make sure that sphincter is open so the food can actually hit into the stomach, right? So this is something that, like with chronic proton pump inhibitors, like Protonix or omeprazole, those medications, right, they decrease your stomach acid production and can actually aggravate heartburn. Again, everyone's situation is a little bit different, so don't go getting off of your PPIs without talking to your medical provider first. But that can be partly a cause, is that just that the sphincter is not getting the call that there is a bunch of stomach acid in there. So that then helps to explain the pro tip. So one thing that we want to do then is, if we know that you're getting heartburn, a great thing to try is take an apple cider vinegar shot. So I mentioned it last week, where you just get I usually do a capful of the apple cider vinegar, throw it in some water and just drink that before meals. About 15 minutes or so is kind of that sweet spot, but honestly, some is better than none. So if you're about to start eating, then you can just do that and it'll help to stimulate your digestion. But for heartburn, right, what it's going to do is to help increase that stomach acid production, because you're essentially increasing the stomach, the acidity within the stomach. And so that's going to tell the sphincter to close, which is what you want, because you don't want that reflux. The other thing is limit fluid intake during meals, because of the exact same reason, right? When you're taking food in, your stomach acid is going to go down. So if you're then also, say, drinking a bunch of water during your meals, you're diluting that stomach acid even further, which then is going to tell the sphincter to relax even more, and it can take a lot longer for it to then close back up, which then is, you get that heartburn after waiting for it can take after that. Oh my goodness. So heartburn, it's because you're drinking too much water, it can happen soon after you're done eating. Another thing that can cause heartburn actually is that you didn't chew your food. You're just getting a little bit like the indigestion feeling and the reflux from that. So chewing your food is incredibly important. Just stimulating your digestion, because your stomach knows how to work if you're doing what it's supposed to do. The other thing, one of the best ways actually for heartburn, is sometimes it's just trigger foods. So avoiding spicy foods. So spicy foods actually will help that sphincter to, it just stimulates the acidity, and so stuff comes up that way. Peppermint actually will relax the sphincter. So peppermint chocolate also relaxes the sphincter, which then means if your sphincter is sensitive to peppermint or to chocolate or tomatoes or any of these foods or beverages, coffee and alcohol, then it's going to just be a little bit more lax and stay open. And so eliminating those, or at least significantly reducing them, can really make a difference for heartburn symptoms. The other thing is avoid overeating and late night eating, because what happens, one, overeating, you're putting so much food in, you're really limiting or decreasing the amount of stomach acid within the stomach, so that sphincter never gets to close, right? It thinks that it's continuing to digest. And then the late night eating, usually that's actually because of similar reasons, except for the fact the late night part is that when we go, it's late, so we're gonna go to sleep soon. So if you go to sleep, you're laying down, right? Usually people lay flat on their back or on their side. On the side steeper, but anyways, if you are eating late at night and then you lay down, that sphincter never got to close, right? Because you just ate, which then means the stomach acid is lower. So it thinks, you know, that the sphincter just hasn't closed yet. And now you lay down and then the fluid can definitely come up and uncomfortable. So what can you do then, again, as a refresher, is to stimulate your digestion and treat your digestive tract the way that it is designed to, meaning limit your fluid intake during meals, avoid overeating and late night eating, right? Because that's just going to decrease, keep that stomach acid relatively lower than what that sphincter needs it to be in order to close up. Avoid your trigger foods. If you don't know what your trigger foods are, what I like folks to do is to play around with it. So, you know, be very cognizant of, like, you know, I'm making a dish, or I'm having spicy food today, and I'm going to pay attention to whether or not my reflux, my heartburn acts up. And I'm going to pay attention to how long after. Is it like right after the meal? Does it persist longer than that, etc. Same thing with peppermint chocolate, all of those. And it's just a matter of figuring out which ones are specific for you and then getting rid of them, or at least significantly reducing that, because sometimes it's just that your body needs a break. Okay, next is gas and bloating. So this really depends on the location. So gas happens because we have you know, the microbiome, so those critters, they help to break down our food. And if for one reason or another our food sits around longer, sometimes that's just some certain foods do sit around longer in the intestines. That's actually what's the basis of the low FODMAPs diet. And FODMAPs is like fructooligro disaccharide diet. Essentially, it just looks at how long does food sit around or ferment in the intestines and measures it that way. And so again, certain foods just naturally will ferment in your intestines because they sit around longer. So that's one reason that you can get the gas and the bloating. And that usually will happen more so in the small intestine. If it happens higher up, say closer to the duodenum, which is where that first line, that upper line is separating the stomach, and then it goes down that area, if you have more of the maldigestion right there, then you're going to get gas coming off from those bacteria, and then it can make its way into the stomach. And then from the stomach, now it actually has a way out, because it just has to relax that lower esophageal sphincter, which is the one that we've just been talking about, so that you can actually burp, right? And then you can have gas that goes rectally, right, a fart, and that happens because it's in the large intestine. But what happens when that gas is stuck in the small intestine? It's stuck between the that lower stomach sphincter, right, the pyloric sphincter, and then it goes all the way down, and the large intestine has its own sphincter separating from the small intestine, which then means you basically have a balloon, right? You have two ends, they're both cinched off, and then you have gas in the center. So now you have like an animal balloon, but you're really uncomfortable, right? Because it's all that pressure, and your stomach's not used to that, your intestines don't like that. And so that can also be caused by the dysbiosis, by having different bacteria in there that are then eating your food rather than letting you absorb it, and they're off-gassing. Again, whether that's hydrogen or methane or whatever, those can have downstream side effects, but it all has to it all gets stuck in that small intestine. So what do you do to help it go away? Well, I'll tell you. So first thing is stimulate your migrating motor complex. So let me remind you about the migrating motor complex, because I think everyone just needs to know this, and I just love telling everyone about it over and over again in case you forget, because it's important. So the migrating motor complex is the body's natural dishwasher system. It's the way that your body, your digestive tract, cleans itself out. It starts 90 minutes after fasting. So 90 minutes after you're done with your last meal, taking any calories in, it then starts going. And what it does at that moment is your stomach releases acid, and this is all happening in the duodenum, which is the beginning part of the small intestine. So the stomach releases some acid, the pancreas releases some all its digestive enzymes, and then the gallbladder will actually release some of its bile too. Now you have all of this wonderful fluid right at the beginning of the small intestine, and your body cleans house because it does a sweeping action. So essentially takes that wonderful fluid that's been secreted by your organs and then sweeps it along, so that if there's any food sitting around, if there's any bacteria, parasites, viruses, like anything and everything that's in there is literally getting swept away. So again, that starts 90 minutes after fasting, and then it takes 90 minutes for one round to complete. So that's 3 hours from start to finish for the first round. If you continue to fast, so say, you are now 4 hours, 5 hours away from your meal, that means you got more and more rounds of the migrating motor complex. So how is that going to help with your gas and your bloating? Because literally it's going to sweep it away, right? So instead of feeling all that extra pressure within your small intestine, it's actually getting moved out so that you can actually, eliminate the gas when you fart it out or get it out. The other thing is that it's preventing the maldigestion. So it's preventing food from sitting around too long, which then gives your gut bacteria more opportunity to eat it. And so what that then does, right, they have more food, so they're just munching on all of your nutrition and spitting out gas. And this is more so when we're talking about dysbiosis, so meaning, right, it's an imbalance in that flora. It's not healthy, right? So you're going to have it's going to cause the gas, the bloating, maybe even constipation, diarrhea, which is what we're going to talk about next. But stimulating your migrating motor complex by spacing out your meals 3 to 5 hours can significantly reduce gas and bloating, because all you're doing is using your body's natural way of cleaning house, so that every time after you're done eating, right, it's actually able to kind of move things along. So that means you got to ditch the snacking, because when you're snacking, your body, you snack, like every 2 hours or something. What that then means is 90 minutes, the first hour and a half was just to get it started. But then you only got one round, not even a whole round in, right? Because you stopped it 30 minutes in. So basically you did all the work, the waiting period, and then you stopped it prematurely. So you're not going to get those benefits of actually moving things out or getting that bloating out. So meal spacing 3 to 5 hours is so important for gas and bloating. It also is really important for constipation, because the exact same reason, right? Constipation happens because stuff is sitting around longer in the intestines than it needs to. So you're not excreting it normally, right? So what that then means is we just want to stimulate that motility action. So how can you, other than meal space, 3 to 5 hours, what else can you do? Well, diet-wise, you can do an elimination challenge to determine your trigger foods. So just like everything else, it all depends on your personal body. Everyone's a little bit different, and not everyone can tolerate all of the foods in the same ways. And so the common ones that I have found is grains, so like wheat in particular, dairy, and alcohol. Dairy can cause the gas and bloating because, if you're not able to break down that protein, so you don't have the particular enzymes, but your gut bacteria does, you basically just fed them a huge meal and they're very happy to eat it all up, which then means they're going to be off-gassing because that's their byproduct. And so doing the same exact thing with like the heartburn triggers is just trying to figure out what your particular foods are. The best way though for the gas and the bloating is actually to remove it completely for 30 days so that, it's your microbiome and all of your flora start to even out a little bit, and then add it back in and see what happens. My favorite ways now to do it when I do elimination diets, that reintroduction, is to have a large amount of the food that I'm testing. And the main reason for that is to ensure that I know whether or not I actually have a reaction. So because I've been off of it, say the grains, been off of gluten for 30 days, now I add in a huge amount of gluten. So like pancakes, actually waffles. I like waffles a lot. So waffles, and now I have that huge exposure, right? Because it's not just like a little, like a bite of waffle. It's like waffles. And so what that then does is I'm going to find out soon after, within the next 2-3 days, whether or not I'm going to have a symptom, whether it increases my gas, my bloating, because I've had that large amount. So it's like this huge push, like, you got to tolerate all of this. And then at that point, you can kind of tease it out, meaning play around with the dose. Maybe next time it's, not having the whole waffle, maybe it's just half the waffle, and paying attention to if gas and bloating still happens, because it may not, because it's just enough to be right under that threshold of symptoms. And then the biggest thing with, and then dairy I already talked about, and then alcohol, just because alcohol is really inflammatory. And what it does actually for alcohol is that your body will utilize the nutrients, the straight up calories. I don't want to say nutrients because there's no nutrients in alcohol. It's just poison. That most folks like to indulge in, so no judgment. But alcohol, what it does, right, it has this high caloric amount, and so what happens is your body will shunt to use all of that, mobilize that energy first. So if you just ate, that food is sitting around longer in your intestines, which then, right, same reason, your flora has more opportunity, more time to just munch on that rather than your body actually doing it. All right, and then some herbs. So say, you have the, with bloating, one of the herbs, again, peppermint is fantastic, but if you have heartburn, it can definitely trigger that. So you just want to be careful and know how it affects you personally. But peppermint is what we call a carminative. So what it actually does is it helps the body to kind of help get rid of the gas that's around there. Chamomile is really fantastic. And these ones I would use as teas. So having like peppermint tea can be really helpful. And a lot of cultures will actually end with like peppermint tea because of its benefits for digestion. Chamomile is really soothing, so that's also great for abdominal pain. It can also help with nausea, like as you see here, ginger, which I talked about for nausea in particular, also great for gas and bloating. So a lot of these herbs are not just one thing, they only do one thing. They usually can help with all of your digestive complaints because they have a bunch of different other chemicals in them. And so peppermint tea is really great for that uncomfortable feeling. But really what I'd like you to hunker down on is stimulating the migrating motor complex, because that's really your protection against so many different things. And it's so important that it's actually this week's challenge. And I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. So that's gas and bloating. So let's talk constipation and diarrhea. This is probably what I see the most folks for because it's all about, eliminating regularly, right? Constipation is when it's motility is too slow. So you have hard stools and or infrequent stools. And then you have diarrhea, which is, right, the motility is too fast. Things are getting pushed along a lot faster. And so you have loose and or frequent bowel movements. And often both situations are uncomfortable. And we can change the constipation and diarrhea by altering the microbiome as well. And I'll do that often with patients, is utilizing different probiotics based off of their health condition. And so I have on there, right, the picture of the large intestine. So the large intestine's main role is for water absorption. So, right, constipation is when the food is sitting too long in the large intestine, that your large intestine is absorbing all of the water that's in there because right, things are just staying longer and your body doesn't take into account that. It's like, oh, there's still water here, so I'm gonna keep taking it. Diarrhea, right, is it's going so fast through that large intestine that your body can't suck up the water fast enough, which then is going to cause more of that, the loose bowel movements, the frequent and frequency as well. All right. So this is, if you've seen me in office, you very, very likely have seen this stool chart. It's actually the same one that was in the slides last week. So if you were here or watched the replay, this looks very familiar. And the reason I have it in here is because it's really important to honestly to know what your poop looks like, because it gives you so much information about what's going on in your gut. So with the severe, right, the type 1, type 2, that's constipation. That's what the type 1 in particular is, like that rabbit pellet stool, very hard. What that tells me is that, you know, things are sitting around a long time. And when that happens, you can have other symptoms. So to touch on that, you can have hormonal issues because you eliminate your excess hormones through fiber, but oftentimes when you have the food sitting around because of constipation, your body is able to reabsorb the cholesterol in particular, which is the building blocks for the hormones. And so and then also you excrete your body wants to excrete excess hormones through the fiber, but if your fiber is around longer, right, you're just reabsorbing it back up because it hasn't exited. And so you get that really hard stools. And then along with that, you're going to also be absorbing more toxins because stuff is just sitting around in the intestines. And so your body can absorb more of it. And what that means is it can cause acne. It can actually cause allergies as well. It can cause mood disorders too. And I forgot to mention with the microbiome that we actually make the most amount of serotonin within our gut because of our gut flora. And so certain bacteria actually help to promote those neurotransmitters. And so if you have the imbalance in flora, which is going to happen if you don't have normal bowel movements, because right, it's just affecting the change in the flora, then you can have some symptoms from that as well. So anytime I have folks who tell me that they're a type 1, type 2, then I'm thinking, okay, this is constipation that I need to fix. Type 3, type 4, those are basically normal. Type 5, honestly, I'm okay with those for the most part. It's like those are like a fine tune. You just need a little bit more fiber or a little bit of adjustments. Whereas when we're talking about type 6, type 7, we need to do a little bit more heavy duty. And that's when I'll often pull on probiotics more so for treating diarrhea. Okay, enough about the poop chart. Let's actually get to the pro tips. So with constipation, diet is so important. Drinking plenty of water, especially upon waking, because if you, I talked about last week about several different reflexes that we have within our colon. One is drinking water first thing upon waking, first thing in the morning will actually stimulate a bowel movement. So if you're not drinking water, drink water first thing, 8 ounces minimum, to one, hydrate your body so that you don't have a dried up sponge of a brain, which honestly, every time I think of my brain as like a dried up sponge, I'm like, I need more water. So hopefully, and so I tell you that, so hopefully it also does the same thing for you and help you to drink some more water. Because right, in constipation, if you don't have enough water, then of course your bowel movements are going to be harder because your body's just absorbing all of the water you're taking in, and there's not enough to keep it in the stool. So drink plenty of water. Fiber. Fiber can really make a difference because it adds that bulk to the stools. So in particular, that's the insoluble fiber. That's the fiber that we can't break down. So basically, the way it came in is the way it comes out. So you can kind of think of like corn as an insoluble fiber. And there's a bunch of other ones that will stay essentially the same way. And then there's soluble fiber, which is like the 2 tablespoons ground flaxseeds is my most common recommendation because it's so beneficial for a lot of different things, particularly like hormones, and can also affect your cholesterol levels positively. And what it does though is it adds that actual bulk to the stool, so you're not getting those hard like rabbit pellet. Instead, there's actually stuff to move along and move your body. So the other reflex that I had talked about last week was the reflex that gets stimulated when we walk. So if you drink water first thing in the morning and then go for a walk, that will help to stimulate a bowel movement even more because we have those reflexes. The other thing, if you need something that's a little bit more faster acting, is eat prunes. So the tip with that is you're already constipated, which means I already know you're dehydrated. You don't have enough water in your body, which is why your body's trying to absorb all of it. So plump up those dehydrated plums overnight. Some plums, they are actual plums, but dehydrated prunes to turn them into plums. And what that'll do is make sure that you get that laxative effect of the plums because they have a particular chemical within them. But also you get the water in there, so it's not going to take away your water, right? Because your body is already going to hydrate up those prunes. But if you do it beforehand, you're not you're not going to make yourself more constipated. So that's a pro tip. Hydrate your prunes if you're using it for a laxative effect. The other thing is magnesium. So there's many different forms of magnesium. The most common ones that I'll use for constipation is magnesium oxide and magnesium citrate. Magnesium citrate is probably the more commonly used one. That's what's in Calm, the powder magnesium drink. That's heavily advertised actually. And so that magnesium, what it does is it stays mostly in the gut. So the way magnesium works is that it's a mineral. And so that mineral will actually stay within the digestive tract. And because your body is like, oh, there's more concentration of this mineral within the gut lumen or within the actual gut tube, right? What it does is it brings water with it. That's just naturally what happens because of physiology. And so taking magnesium can help to loosen up your bowel movements if they're hard, because it's just causing more water to stay within the digestive tract. The tip though is that if you take, or the problem is if you take too much, the only side effect is going to be diarrhea. So that gets me into this one, diarrhea pro tips. Is mind your magnesium. Too much will definitely cause diarrhea. The good thing though is that if you discontinue, you stop taking the magnesium, the diarrhea will self-resolve, so it'll go away on its own, and you can start back up the magnesium. Just do less than what you had before, because that's kind of what we call bowel tolerance. So your bowels did not like when you took, more, whatever that dose was. So say it was like a scoop and a half. So that was too much. So then the next time you do it, when no more diarrhea, normal stools again, is just go to like a scoop or a scoop and a quarter, something along those lines. And then of course, diet. So avoid your trigger foods. More common ones is dairy and gluten. If you're not able to process or break down those particular proteins within them, then it can definitely, just goes through your whole system undigested. And so dairy in particular is that the lactose, so lactose intolerant folks will really commonly have diarrhea. And the gas, the bloating, because the lactose, you weren't able to break it down, which then means your gut bacteria did, and because of that, they then their byproducts of the gas created the bloating, etc. Fiber is incredibly important because it's going to help to absorb some of that water, right? That excess water, really important. Probiotics is what I talked about. We can change that up. I reserve that for folks where it's very extreme. But even if it's just like an acute setting, like an infection, one is sometimes we don't have to treat the infection. Our body can just eliminate it. We just have, a couple days, and then we recover. And then our microbiome will actually correct itself, assuming we haven't made significant changes within our diet, etc. And so we don't always have to treat the infection. The one thing I forgot to put on here is that if it actually is an infection, say you had food poisoning, what can be really helpful is like charcoal tablets. The thing with charcoal though is that it prevents the absorption of everything, so that includes your food. So that's actually what I'll keep with me when I'm like traveling. So back when I was in the Philippines, anytime that I had like something that I thought maybe had contaminated water, I'd always just take a charcoal cap, because I'd be able to taste my food, but then I wouldn't have to deal with any possible infection because it's binding up any of the toxins and the bacteria or bad flora within there. So that's helpful if you already have an infection. You can just take some charcoal caps, but you have to be careful, because if you're doing it with other medications, things like that, you're not going to absorb your medication, so you have to be really careful. So of course, go with the advice of your medical provider. If I am not yours, then don't listen to me. Do what your particular doctor has told you. Okay. With that, quick reminder just about the week challenge is to skip the snacking, because when we're snacking, that is what's going to stop the migrating motor complex from happening, which is going to cause the gas, the bloating, possibly even constipation. So you got to ditch the snacking, space your meals out 3 to 5 hours. And if you've learned something new, explain it to a friend, because teaching is going to be the way to really get it in there. And then forward them the webinar, the replay, because share the knowledge. That's what I'm all about. That's why I'm doing this whole series for y'all. So with that, questions. I know I just talked a whole bunch about a bunch of different things. So go for it if you have any. But my main intention is I really hope that you had some great tips that you can pull upon at some time when you need to, because those are conditions or symptoms that everyone feels at one time or another, and just having a few tricks up your sleeves to bring you a little bit comfort is really helpful. Okay. And I don't think I see any questions. And I can't, for some reason, I can't pull up the Q&A. So if you're trying to get me there, I can't get it that way. So just put it in the chat. So question about, is it okay to take an apple cider vinegar shot while eating, or even after if we've got beforehand? Yes, absolutely. I'm a firm believer that some is better than none. So if you, in the middle of your meal, you're like, ah, crap, I forgot my apple cider vinegar shot, you definitely can take it. It's still going to help stimulate your digestion a little bit more. It's going to help to increase that, the stomach acid a little bit more. And so those are all great things. You'll also probably get the pucker, which is going to cause more of the stomach juices to get secreted. So intermittent fasting, coffee, can you have a coffee latte with almond milk? So if you're talking about the migrating motor complex, that will actually stop the migrating motor complex from happening, because it has the almond milk. So anytime that you have, calories, that is what's going to, one, stop it's not fasting anymore because you're getting calories in. So in terms of intermittent fasting, it's only going to be like black coffee. For the migrating motor complex action, it will actually stop with basically anything other than water and herbal teas. So that is what I recommend during those 3 to 5 hours of spacing. The thing I forgot to mention is that if you have you do the meal spacing and you find yourself that you are absolutely starving, like you're like, like 2.5 hours in, you're really hungry. What that really tells me is that you didn't eat enough during that last meal. So often it's just about increasing your protein and your fat content within that meal. The other trick is to end with something sweet. All of those will help to maintain your blood sugar more. So instead of it spiking and then dipping, which is what happens with like carbohydrates in particular and sugars, they'll spike that blood sugar and then dip it, and then you're going to feel really hungry. And so we're trying to avoid that, right? We want to have a more level blood sugar, more level metabolism, which is really helpful for the current atmosphere right now with COVID-19. One of the biggest risk factors that we have found, or studies have shown, is that it is actually a poor metabolism that puts folks at higher risk, because it works with changing your blood sugar. So having an even blood sugar is really important during these particular times, though it's important always, but we got a virus that's trying to hunt us down. So enough with that. Next question is, you have peppermint tea that has a built-in probiotic. Would it be wise to see if I get heartburn upon drinking it? Yes, the peppermint tea definitely can. So just pay attention to see whether or not that causes some symptoms. And for some reason, I really can't pull up my Q&A section. I'm gonna see if it's hiding somewhere else. Oh, I found it. Okay. Other question is drinking OJ with coffee oh yeah, the coffee is likely what's causing some upset. So how can you tell the difference between heartburn and a heart attack? So it depends. So some folks are, not all heart attacks happen because of, what am I trying to say? So heartburn can be experienced differently, particularly within genders. Same thing with a heart attack. So with heartburn, what will happen is for women, we can have what's called silent reflux. Men can have it as well, but it's much more common in women. And the biggest symptom there is actually a cough, particularly worse at night because you're laying down. And so, right, you're getting that reflux then. Very particular treatment for that. And with a heart, so usually with heartburn, you can feel more like centrally, what we call like the epigastric area, so right around like above the belly button, and you can feel it sometimes up into the esophagus. With heart attack, the main thing is that you're going to get shooting pains down the left side. And it's really important to look at your other health risk factors because that's going to be a bigger determinant, to be honest. As well, because again, some folks can have silent reflux, and the heart attacks can be different in individuals. All right, next question I got here is how long is it is recommended to wait after eating before drinking water again? You probably want to wait like you know, a little bit is fine. So if you're thirsty, you definitely can, but it's really, don't go chugging a bunch of water before and after your meals because that's going to dilute it. And then if you are going to do that, waiting about like an hour or so is a good amount of time. So your food will sit in your stomach for upwards of 4 hours. Again, everyone's physiology is a little bit different, but it's a couple hours in there. And so if you're doing it right after, you're gonna soon after. So waiting about an hour or so to drink more water. Though really with water, to be properly hydrated, you want to be drinking it throughout the day. And the last other question I have here is also for microbiomes to produce vitamins. How do we figure out where our own deficiencies are and what vitamins we need to supplement? So yeah, our microbiomes definitely produce vitamins. And so there's different ways that we can do testing with that. There's specialty labs. The more common deficiencies is what I'm looking for, honestly, which is usually like the B vitamins, vitamin D, which again, those all get synthesized in one way or another with our microbiome. And I test those straight with blood testing. So that's just a simple blood draw, and looking at those levels will then tell me whether or not you're in good amounts. The other thing that I look at is so there's other markers that will help to tell me downstream whether or not you're actually getting your vitamins into your cells. And then there's also, again, specialty labs with that. And that's really how I find out whether or not someone has a deficiency. There are certain vitamins that are perfectly fine to almost always take because they don't have serious side effects. So for example, B vitamins are water soluble. So if you're taking an oral B vitamin, it will, if you just have so much in your body, your body will only absorb so much. So it's water soluble, meaning it will stay within the water and you'll just excrete the extra. So it just goes out in your urine. So if you've taken a B vitamin before, or a B complex, which is all of the B vitamins together, what can happen is you get bright yellow urine, right? Fluorescent yellow urine. And that's totally because the B vitamins, just all the excess that you didn't need gets put out that way. Okay, I think that was any other questions for me, or anything you'd like me to refresh on or explain further. If not, then I'm gonna go ahead and stop this and let y'all go on and enjoy your beautiful Tuesday afternoon. So thank you, everyone. All right, I'm gonna stop this. And great, hope you all enjoyed the webinar. And next week, I'll be, we're switching topics and we're gonna be talking about movements, so exciting. All right, and with that, take care, everyone, bye.